The fact that creative is now being decomposed and added as a data point gives us the ability to unify this in a way that hasn't been done since the 80s.
We're joined by Anastasia from CreativeX and Amaryllis from BCG. Welcome both. Anastasia, creativity has always been the part of marketing which is so hard to measure. How has that changed?
Well, I'm going to be quite a pedant and say that there's a distinction between creativity and the creative. And creativity, I believe, is still unmeasurable, but the creative is not. So today, if we zoom out, the creative process goes from the creative idea to the creation of lots of content and all the way to media activation. And now all that content we can measure. If we look at what's changed over the last three to 10 years, there are a couple of trends that I identify. The first one is through better technology, we can now decompose the creative into lots of component parts. So we can actually start to understand what are the ideas we're representing in all the content we're putting out there. The second thing is we can tie all of that data now to outcome. So we can understand how are the creative decisions we're making, driving everything from digital performance all the way to brand and sales lift.
And what sort of possibilities does that open up the moment you can do that?
Yeah, the obvious possibilities, right? And some of the things we see brands doing today is they are taking that data and they're using it to drive more consistency at scale, making sure that their creative ideas are actually being represented in their content. They're extracting lots of learnings so they can scale creative production in a way that aligns to the data that they're getting and driving performance impact. But I think the thing I'm most excited about that we haven't done yet, and we're only starting to see brands dip into it, is really go back to this land of integrated campaigns. How do we make sure that from the creative idea to the hundreds of thousands of ads you make, all the way to the media execution, we are telling the same story, right? From the idea to the content, all the way to the media targeting. And I think the fact that creative is now being decomposed and added as a data point gives us the ability to unify this in a way that hasn't been done since the 80s.
That is huge. Amaryllis, how are agencies able to sort of use some of these creative insights actually to elevate their storytelling, whether it's through concerted campaigns or, sort of what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it's not only the agencies, because we're seeing more and more people actually bringing in the creative generation in-house. For me, I think there are two big trends. On one side, historically, we have always said that marketing had an art and a science component, and they used to be very, very separate. And I think solutions like CreativeX start intersecting the art and the science together. And in that way, you can actually have creative loops that can give you this kind of optimization on a day-to-day. But there is a less visible part that I think it's easy to be overseen, which is having an overview of how much effort and resources we're putting in creative production, and having an overview also of what is being used and what is working. And that actually, on top of the creative component, has a massive optimization potential for agencies, but also for brands to reduce waste and make sure that they actually focus on what works best.
So, Anastasia, what would your advice be for marketing executives who are trying to work out how to turn all the insights they're getting into a creative advantage?
My number one advice would probably be stop mass producing content and start thinking about how you scale your creative ideas. Because the problem is, as Gen AI has come of age, we're talking a lot about how we can make more content, we can make the right content for the right person at any time. But if you ask any marketing leader, more content is not the problem. It's making sure that the content we're actually creating is representing that initial creative brief and idea, that message we want to land to market. And there's a disconnect between those things. So let's make sure that when we're repurposing all that content for different formats, different audiences, different mediums, different channels, that content is still representative of the creative message we want to scale to market. Less content, but more tied back to that message we ultimately want to land.
It's better focus.
Better focused.
Amaryllis?
Just to add on this, I think that there is still an imperative that is very, very needed, which is actually knowing your audience, understanding what works for your concrete kind of audience that you're after, how you can influence their pathways to purchase. I think this is still something that technology cannot replace. So as much as we're using AI and analytics, I think the strategic thinking and the clarity of who we're going after is still something that CMOs should still be focusing on.
Well, Amaryllis, Anastasia, thanks both for joining us.
Thank you.